The story of the war in Ukraine is long and deeply complex, rooted in centuries of shared history, culture, and power struggles. For much of its existence, Ukraine was under the influence or direct control of its larger neighbor, Russia. This history has created a profound and often painful relationship between the two nations. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Ukraine declared its independence, a moment of immense national pride and a step toward charting its own course in the world. This move, however, was viewed by some in Moscow not as the birth of a sovereign nation, but as a historical anomaly, a temporary separation that needed correcting. The idea of a truly independent Western-leaning Ukraine on its border has long been a source of anxiety for the Kremlin. In 2014, these simmering tensions boiled over. Following a pro-Western revolution in Kiev that ousted a pro-Russian president, Russia responded forcefully. It illegally annexed the Crimean Peninsula, a strategically important region of Ukraine, and began backing separatist fighters in the country's eastern Donbas region. The conflict entered a brutal new phase on February 24, 2022. On that day, Vladimir Putin announced a special military operation, launching a full-scale invasion of Ukraine from the north, east, and south. Throughout the Ukraine crisis, and even before it, former President Donald Trump has made a series of statements that have been widely interpreted as siding with Vladimir Putin over Ukraine and even over his own country's intelligence agencies. Standing next to the Russian president at a joint press conference, Trump was asked about Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election. Instead of accepting the unanimous conclusion of American intelligence agencies, Trump appeared to give equal if not greater weight to Putin's denial. He said, "President Putin says it's not Russia. I don't see any reason why it would be." This moment sent shockwaves through the political world both at home and abroad. Another key instance came right as the full-scale invasion began in February 2022. As Russian tanks rolled across the border, many world leaders were condemning Putin's actions in the strongest possible terms. Trump, however, offered a different perspective. In an interview, he described Putin's justification for the invasion, recognizing two separatist regions of Ukraine as independent, as genius and very savvy. This praise for the Russian leader's tactics at the very moment a sovereign nation was being attacked was seen by critics as a stunning and deeply inappropriate endorsement of an act of aggression. The former president has also repeatedly expressed skepticism about the level of U.S. aid being sent to Ukraine, framing it as an unfair burden on American taxpayers. He has even gone so far as to claim that, if he were president, he could end the war in 24 hours. While he has not detailed how he would achieve this, the implication is that it would involve a negotiation that could potentially cede Ukrainian territory to Russia, a resolution that would be seen by many as a victory for Putin. To understand Donald Trump's position, it is essential to look at the core arguments he repeatedly makes. The most prominent of these is his America First philosophy. Trump argues that the United States has spent far too much money and resources on foreign conflicts and international aid, neglecting problems at home. He frames the billions of dollars in military and financial support for Ukraine as money that could be better used to secure the U.S. border, rebuild American infrastructure, or support domestic programs. Another key pillar of his argument is the assertion that European allies are not contributing enough to Ukraine's defense. Trump frequently claims that the United States is shouldering a disproportionate share of the financial burden, while European nations, which are geographically much closer to the conflict, are failing to step up. He presents this as an issue of fairness, suggesting that America is being taken advantage of by its own allies. A third element of Trump's rationale is his belief in the power of personal negotiation and his professed ability to make deals. He has famously claimed he could end the war in 24 hours if he were president. He implies that a face-to-face meeting between himself and Vladimir Putin could quickly resolve the crisis, bypassing the complex diplomatic processes and military realities on the ground. Within the United States, Donald Trump's comments on the Ukraine crisis have sparked a deeply polarized reaction, largely falling along partisan lines. President Joe Biden has repeatedly condemned Trump's rhetoric, framing the support for Ukraine as a critical battle for democracy itself. On the other hand, Trump's position has found fertile ground within his loyal base and among a growing faction of the Republican Party. Internationally, the reaction has been one of widespread concern, particularly among America's European allies. Leaders in countries like Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, as well as the Baltic states bordering Russia, have expressed deep anxiety over the prospect of a second Trump presidency. Of course, in Moscow the reaction has been quite different. While the Kremlin officially refrains from commenting on United States internal politics, state-controlled media in Russia have frequently highlighted Trump's comments in a positive light. The potential consequences of a shift in American policy toward Ukraine are immense and would extend far beyond the battlefields of the Donbas. For Ukraine, the impact would be immediate and potentially catastrophic. The United States has been the single largest provider of military aid, supplying crucial weapons systems, intelligence, and financial support that have enabled Ukrainian forces to resist the Russian invasion. A sudden halt or significant reduction in this aid would severely cripple Ukraine's ability to defend itself, potentially forcing Kiev to negotiate from a position of extreme weakness and accept a peace deal on Russia's terms. The ripple effect on United States politics and its global standing would also be profound. A withdrawal of support for Ukraine would signal a major retreat from America's traditional role as a leader of the democratic world. This could weaken alliances like NATO from within, and diminish American influence on the world stage, creating a power vacuum that rivals like China and Russia would be eager to fill. A Russian victory in Ukraine, facilitated by a withdrawal of American support, would send a dangerous message to autocrats and aggressors everywhere, potentially sparking new conflicts in other parts of the world. As of today, August 15, 2025, the situation on the ground in Ukraine remains incredibly challenging. The war has settled into a brutal grind, a war of attrition where progress is measured in meters, not miles. Ukrainian forces are grappling with persistent shortages of ammunition, particularly artillery shells, and a growing strain on their manpower after years of intense fighting. The ongoing debate about the future of American aid creates a climate of deep uncertainty for Ukraine and its European partners, with every legislative battle watched with bated breath in Kyiv and other European capitals. Ultimately, the debate over American support for Ukraine is about more than just one country's foreign policy or one conflict in Eastern Europe. It cuts to the very heart of the principles that have guided the international community for nearly a century. At its core, this is a question of whether powerful nations have the right to invade smaller neighbors, redraw borders by force, and extinguish a sovereign people's right to choose their own destiny. If the world allows this to happen to Ukraine, it sets a precedent that makes every smaller nation less safe. The stance of the United States, as the world's leading economic and military power, carries enormous weight. For decades, America has championed the cause of democracy and stood as a bulwark against authoritarian expansion. A decision to abandon Ukraine would be seen by both allies and adversaries as a retreat from this historic role. The credibility of American promises and the strength of its alliances are on the line. The current international system, with all its flaws, was designed to prevent the kind of great power conflicts that led to 2 world wars. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a direct assault on that system. Therefore, how this crisis unfolds will help define the 21st century. Will it be an era where international law and democratic values are upheld, or one where aggressive authoritarianism is allowed to advance unchecked? The choices made in Washington, Brussels, and other world capitals will have consequences that reverberate for generations. The struggle of the Ukrainian people is not just their own. It is a frontline defense of the idea that all nations, big and small, have the right to be free and secure. Supporting them is not just an act of charity, but an investment in a more stable and democratic world for all.